Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Oh, yeah. Always ready to dive in.
Today, we're tackling a topic that's a little like pulling on a loose thread.
Except this one.
Yeah.
This one leads us through, like, decades.
Decades, continents,
Like-
and through conflicts that just never seem to end.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is, but it's fascinating, too. We're talking about the Syrian War and the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Wow.
Two intertwined stories of struggle power and, like, the lasting effects of choices people made, like, over a century ago.
And to help us untangle all this,
Yeah.
you've got a whole stack of YouTube videos here.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome.
We've got everything, the historical roots, first-hand accounts of people who got caught in the crossfire.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, so where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, with most things in the Middle East,
Yeah,
you got to go back to World War I.
World War I.
The Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
It's crumbling.
Crumbling.
And you've got these European powers like Britain, France, Russia.
They're seeing opportunity.
They're seeing opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Not to help, though.
No.
To carve it up for themselves.
It's like a game of Risk,
Totally.
but with real people.
Exactly right.
And that's basically what they did with
Yeah.
the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
1916.
They just drew lines on a map
Yep.
and divided the Middle East,
Between themselves.
ignoring
Firing everything.
the cultures, the religions,
The people,
the desires of the people who live there.
the people who actually live there. Yeah.
And we see those consequences today.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, arbitrary borders,
Uh,
cutting across ethnic lines, religious lines.
it just sets the stage.
Yeah.
For all this tension, all this conflict we're still dealing with today.
And it's not just the borders. There were these conflicting promises, too,
Oh, yeah. You're right.
to the Arabs and the Zionists.
Yeah. The British were playing a very dangerous game,
Very dangerous.
making promises they couldn't keep.
Yeah, so on the one hand, they're promising the Arabs independence.
If they helped overthrow the Ottomans.
Right. But then on the other hand, yeah, they're making promises to the Zionist movement,
Which one?
a Jewish homeland in Palestine.
Well, wait, hold on.
Yeah,
What is Zionism, for those who might not know?
good point. It's a movement that started in the late 19th century.
Okay.
In response to anti-Semitism in Europe,
Yeah.
the goal was to create a Jewish state in Palestine,
Which they saw as...
their historical homeland.
So Britain was promising the same land to two different groups.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that's where the Balfour Declaration comes in.
Ah, yes, the Balfour Declaration.
This 1917 document.
Okay.
It says Britain supports a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
But it's so vague.
It's so vague.
Like, what does national home even mean?
Exactly. And it also said
Yeah.
that the rights of the non-Jewish communities in Palestine,
Yeah.
those should be protected too.
It's like classic vague wording.
It is.
They're trying to keep everyone happy.
With a really
No, it's not
they're
actually.
committing to anything. Committing, yeah.
And that ambiguity would haunt them.
Oh, yes, it would.
And the whole region.
For decades to come.
It created this foundation for the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Right.
Because both sides felt like they had a legitimate claim to the land.
Exactly.
And it also fueled the instability
Yeah.
that would eventually engulf Syria.
Absolutely.
So how do we go from this messy World War I situation
Yeah.
to the Syrian Civil War?
Well, Syria's story,
Yeah.
it's about authoritarian rule, oppression,
Okay.
and people eventually rising up
To demand change.
to demand change. You got the Assad family.
Yeah.
They were in power for decades, ruling with an iron fist.
And then came
The Arab Spring.
a wave of uprisings all across the Middle East.
Yeah.
People demanding democracy
Yeah.
and end to corruption.
And Syria joined in.
They did.
Okay.
But the government's
Yeah,
response was
that's
brutal.
Brutal.
They cracked down hard on the protesters.
Leading,
Armed rebel groups.
like,
The Free Syrian Army. So it went from peaceful protests
yeah.
to armed rebellion pretty quickly.
Unfortunately. Yeah, and what seemed like a unified opposition
Uh-huh.
quickly fractured. This web of alliances and rivalries.
Making even
It's more
like to understand this fracturing.
Yeah.
We got to look at the groups involved, their ideologies, their goals.
Right.
But before we get into that,
Yeah.
can we back up a bit?
Sure.
You mentioned the Assads being in power for decades.
Right.
Was there any connection
Hmm.
between their rule
Okay.
and the instability
Hmm.
from the Sykes-Picot Agreement?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Remember those arbitrary borders?
The ones they drew.
The ones they drew? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they lumped together all these different groups,
Okay.
different ethnicities, religions,
Yeah.
people who had historical tensions.
Yeah.
And that made it so easy
Yeah.
for leaders like the Assads.
To exploit those divisions.
Exactly.
And hold on to power. Hold on to power.
So yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
the seeds of Syria's conflict were sown way before the Arab Spring.
So much earlier.
Way earlier.
And those seeds would blossom into a full-blown war.
Tragically.
When the Syrian people wanted freedom.
And democracy.
And they were met with
violence
and repression. And it's in all this chaos that we see a truly horrific element take root. Sednaya prison.
Yeah.
From those videos, this wasn't just a prison.
It was a symbol.
A symbol of the regime's brutality.
Thousands of people.
So many of them political prisoners.
Yeah, subjected to unimaginable horrors.
Torture, starvation, systematic executions.
It's chilling.
The stories coming out of Sednaya are just chilling. I saw one video with interviews with former prisoners.
Yeah.
They were describing being crammed into tiny cells.
Oh, God.
With dozens of other people, barely room to breathe.
Awful.
They talk about the constant fear, the screams echoing through the halls, and knowing that at any moment they could be taken away and executed.
It's hard to even grasp that level of cruelty.
It really is. And beyond the horror,
yeah.
Sednaya also served a strategic purpose for Assad.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just about punishing dissent.
Right.
It was about crushing it completely.
It was a tool of terror.
Yeah.
A way to silence any opposition and send a very clear message
to anyone who dared to challenge them.
Exactly. This is what happens to you if you oppose us.
And the regime went to great lengths to cover it all up.
Oh, yeah. Reports of a crematorium being installed just to dispose of the bodies.
It's a chilling reminder of how far authoritarian regimes will go to hold on to power.
To silence dissent.
And as horrific as Sednaya was, and still is.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing complicating the Syrian civil war.
Right. It gets even more tangled when you bring in outside forces.
It becomes a proxy war.
Exactly.
What does that mean, proxy war?
It means other countries with their own agendas.
Okay.
Start backing different sides. Russia, Iran, the U.S., Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel.
Wow.
They all jump in, each backing their own factions, fueling the violence.
So it's like a recipe for chaos.
Pretty much, yeah, with all these different countries pulling strings.
So where do we even begin to unravel that?
Well, let's start with Russia.
Yeah.
Longtime ally of the Assad regime.
Okay.
Providing military support, weapons, diplomatic cover.
So for Russia, it's about maintaining influence in the region.
Exactly. Syria is strategically important for them. It gives them a foothold in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
Allows them to project power in the Middle East.
Makes sense. And then there's Iran.
Another major backer of Assad.
Their motivations are
a little more complex.
They
share a common enemy with Syria, Israel.
Okay.
Plus, they see Syria as a crucial part of what they call the Shia Crescent.
The Shia Crescent.
A corridor of influence stretching from Iran through Iraq and Syria into Lebanon.
So for Iran, it's about regional power and religious ties.
Yes, and their involvement has been significant. They've sent thousands of fighters, advisors to support the Syrian army.
Okay.
And they've played a key role in keeping the regime afloat financially.
And what about the U.S.? What role did they play?
The U.S. initially supported some rebel groups,
Yeah.
but their involvement was always a bit hesitant and often contradictory.
Okay.
Remember the Kurds?
The group fighting for autonomy in northern Syria.
Yes. The ones who were instrumental in the fight against ISIS.
Okay, so the U.S. backed them in that fight.
They did, providing weapons and training.
Okay, but here's where it gets even more complicated.
Right.
Turkey, a NATO ally of the U.S., considers the Kurdish forces,
specifically the YPG,
to be terrorists,
linked to the PKK,
which has been fighting for Kurdish independence in Turkey
for decades.
So the U.S. was supporting a group that their own ally considered a terrorist organization.
Yes, it created a huge rift between the U.S. and Turkey.
Wow.
Turkey even launched military operations into northern Syria.
To push back against the YPG.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable how many layers there are to this conflict.
I know.
It seems like every intervention, every alliance creates new problems and new enemies.
It's a complex situation, for sure.
And the situation with Israel adds another layer.
Right.
So what is Israel's role in the Syrian civil war?
Israel's main concern has been twofold.
Okay.
Iran's growing influence in Syria and the possibility of advanced weapons falling into the hands of Hezbollah, a Lebanese Shia militia backed by Iran, which Israel considers a major threat.
So they've been taking action to try and stop that?
Yes. They've conducted airstrikes inside Syria, targeting Iranian-backed forces and Hezbollah.
Which, of course,
further complicates things.
And increases the risk of a wider conflict.
Exactly.
It's just mind-boggling how this civil war that started with demands for democracy
I know.
became this tangled mess of international rivalries and proxy battles.
It's hard to see how you could ever untangle it.
It really is. Finding a path to peace in Syria seems almost impossible with so many competing interests and actors involved. It really underscores the devastating nature of these conflicts.
Right.
There's no neat ending.
Nope.
It's an ongoing struggle for survival and power.
Yeah.
And amidst all the geopolitical stuff,
Yeah.
it's easy to forget the human cost.
It is.
Hundreds of thousands killed, millions displaced.
Yeah.
A country in ruins.
A whole country.
And those videos, those firsthand accounts,
Oh, yeah.
they really drove that home.
They did. There's one that really got to me.
Oh, yeah.
The story of this young Syrian woman who had to flee her home with her family. She talked about the terror of the bombings.
Oh, man.
The desperation of their journey,
Yeah.
leaving everything behind.
Those personal stories, those glimpses into the lives of
Yeah.
everyday people caught in the middle,
Right.
that's what makes it real.
Yeah.
It reminds you that behind all the headlines, all the political talk, there are real people
Real people.
whose lives have been shattered.
And their stories also highlight the refugee crisis.
Yeah.
Millions of Syrians forced from their homes,
Yeah.
seeking safety in neighboring countries and beyond.
Putting a huge strain on resources,
Right.
leading to social and political tensions.
Yeah.
It's a global crisis with effects way beyond Syria's borders.
Absolutely.
It reminds us how interconnected our world is.
Right.
What happens in one place can affect us all.
Even those of us who feel far removed from it.
And then you have the challenge of rebuilding.
Oh, yeah.
Even if the fighting stopped tomorrow,
Right.
Syria would still face this monumental task.
Rebuilding infrastructure.
Healing deep divisions, providing basic services.
It's almost unimaginable.
Where do you even begin?
I know.
After so much destruction and trauma?
Yeah, that's the question Syrians are asking themselves.
Right.
And it's one that will require international cooperation and support.
Yeah.
But even beyond the physical rebuilding, there's the issue of justice and accountability.
For the atrocities committed.
Especially at Sinai.
Can there even be peace and reconciliation without addressing those crimes?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you move on as a society
Yeah.
when there's so much pain and injustice?
It's a tough question.
It is.
No easy answers.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
Lasting peace in Syria
Yeah.
requires more than just rebuilding buildings.
There's more than that.
It's addressing the root causes,
Yeah.
healing the divisions.
And finding a way to ensure justice for the victims.
A long and difficult process
Likely.
with setbacks along the way.
Probably.
But despite the bleakness,
Yeah.
there are glimmers of hope.
There are.
Syrians working to rebuild their communities.
Yeah.
To document human rights abuses.
Yeah.
Advocate for a future without violence and oppression.
It's inspiring to see.
It is to see that resilience,
Yeah.
that determination to create a better future.
Yeah.
Even in the face of such overwhelming challenges.
And their stories.
Yeah.
Along with all the historical and geopolitical stuff. Yeah.
Remind us that these conflicts
Yeah.
aren't just something happening over there.
Right.
They demand our attention,
Our understanding.
our empathy.
They're a reminder that peace
Yeah.
isn't just the absence of war.
It's more than that.
It's a process.
A journey
It takes constant effort, dialogue.
and a willingness to face difficult truths.
That was intense,
It was.
but so insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like I understand the Syrian war and the Arab-Israeli conflict so much better now.
I agree.
And this is just the beginning, really.
Yeah.
So much more to explore.
So many perspectives.
And that's what we love to do here.
That's right.
If you're as fascinated by these deep dives as we are,
Yeah.
hit that subscribe button.
Do it.
We're always exploring new topics.
Great.
We love to keep bringing you these insightful conversations.
Yeah. Imagine the knowledge we could unlock together.
Until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring
Keep questioning.
and keep diving deep.